everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Honeybee Stamps, and in today's video I'm going to show you how I created this spooky background for my spider web. The stamp set I'm going to be using is called Happy Halloween, and it is the only stamp set that I will be using. I'm going to start by ink blending my background, and I am going to put a lot of work into this background because I had a certain look in mind for this that I really wanted to achieve. So I am starting with Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide ink. I have a domed foam blending tool that I'm applying my ink with. And once I kind of have that in about the general area of where the center of the spider web is going to be, then I'm going to come in with Crackling Campfire, which is really juicy and saturated. So I went and grabbed a Post-it note to protect not only my fingers, but also my cardstock. So I'm going to go around the outer edges of that with that Crackling Campfire. You can see that it is really intense and there's a significant line between the Squeezed Lemonade and that Crackling Campfire. So I'm going to be going back over that Squeezed Lemonade and trying to soften out that transition. This background did take a little bit of work because of the colors that I chose, but I think it turns out really great in the end. Next, I'm going to come in with Black Soot. Once again, this is a pretty drastic color change compared to my previous color. So I'm going to add that all around the edges to really create that massive contrast that I wanted. Again, I'm going to come back in with my Crackling Campfire, and don't be afraid to come back in and go over your colors numerous times. You can see at this point that it doesn't look that great. So I just keep kind of going over it, sometimes a little light-handed to not get so much ink on there. I just really wanted to smooth out the transition, but I also did not want to lose that bright yellow center. Normally, when I am covering an entire panel with ink, I like to use that dome foam blending tools. It's really hard to say, but I wanted a softer transition. So I grabbed a blending brush that I am going to go over the edges with that Black Soot. And that really does help kind of smooth things out and make that a little bit softer as it gets towards the center. I'm feeling pretty good about the background at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp my spider web. Now, you definitely could have stamped and heat embossed the sentiment first and then ink blended over the top, but I personally do prefer to ink blend first and then stamp because then I feel like I'm getting that crisp black ink that I really want. So I placed that spiderweb background over my panel and I'm going to ink it up with a Versafine ink. One of the reasons I'm using Versafine is because it is a really crisp black and it stamps really nice over an ink blended background like this. You can try your other black inks you may have on hand. I just find with especially Oxide backgrounds, the Versafine works really well. So I did miss a couple spots and I also wanted it to be pretty intense. So I inked it up one more time, really kind of, you can see, applied some pressure there to make sure I'm getting that entire spiderweb background because I'm not going to be trimming this down, or I didn't plan on trimming this down. Versafine ink also stays wet a little bit longer, so I'm going to set that off on the side to dry, and I'm going to work on my sentiment, which is just this Happy Halloween. I have some black cardstock here in my Misti stamping tool that I'm going to prep with an anti-static powder tool because I want to heat emboss this. I'm going to use the metallic silver ink from Honeybee Stamps. It is a pigment ink, so it's going to stay wet a little longer and is also just really great for heat embossing. So I stamped that down. I am going to stamp it one more time. One of the reasons I chose this silver is because I plan on embossing with silver embossing powder. And I feel like having the two combined is really going to make it nice and metallic. So I stamped that second time. Then I'm going to sprinkle on the Brutus Monroe, I think this is called a sterling silver embossing powder. I tapped that on, or tapped off the excess off the cardstock, and then I'm going to melt that with my heat tool. You just want to make sure your heat gun is nice and warmed up before you apply that heat to your cardstock. That'll help minimize some warping. Then I'm going to take the coordinating die for the sentiment and I'm going to line it up over my words, hold that down with the Best Ever craft tape from Spellbinders and die cut that out. I also die cut out another one just out of some plain black cardstock. I'm going to add some of the liquid glue to the back of my embossed sentiment and place that over the top. So that's going to add some stability behind my sentiment. And I do want to add a little bit more dimension to this, so I'm going to place some black foam squares behind it. You could also die cut out multiple pieces of black cardstock and use that to create your dimension. Now back to my background, I really wanted to add splatters, so I am bringing in some Perfect Pearls in the confetti white and also the gold. So I added a little bit of water to the confetti white and I'm applying that or splattering that onto the background with Distress Oxide inks or even the regular Distress inks. They tend to obviously react with water, but it's also my Perfect Pearls is reacting to it. So my white didn't quite turn out white. It kind of came out more of a warm gold. So I brought in some white paint that I splattered over the background because I really wanted to have that white. I loved the contrast of this dark background, this spooky background with the white splatters. So I let that dry. I also sped up the drying process with a heat tool. And now I'm bringing in this spider. And the spider, I really had contemplated how I was going to do this because when I stamp it over those splatters, you're going to see the splatters through it. But I also did not want to stamp it on white and die cut it because then I would have had a white border and I didn't want that. So I decided to just stamp it twice onto my background. You are going to see the splatters a little bit through it, but I think it turned out pretty good. And now that that is done, I can remove the backing of my black foam squares and add my sentiment down towards the bottom of the card. And that will finish off my card project. So I really loved creating this spooky background. This is kind of a unique color combination. It obviously took a little bit of work, but since it is kind of the focal point of the card, I am glad that I spent the time really working those colors to make them blend. I will have all of my supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog. Thank you so much for joining me today.